Alrighty, chapter 23. No, howled George, not another lecture. I haven't got time. This is an emergency, Cosmos. The picture of the Milky Way zoomed inside the spiral very quickly, as if Cosmos was offended by George's lack of interest. George could see that the spiral was indeed made out of countless stars, and the image whirled past these until it reached a place where it didn't seem to be anything anymore. The picture stopped moving, and the screen looked as if it had been cut into two. The bottom half of the screen was full of stars, and the other half completely empty, except for a thin line that was moving up towards the top edge of the screen. The empty part of the screen seemed to correspond to an unknown part of the universe, an unknown part that the thin line seemed to unravel as it moved. Pointing at the upper end of the line was a moving arrow with a little tag attached to it. The writing was so small George could hardly read it. What does it say? Cosmos didn't say anything else, but the tag grew bigger and bigger, and then George saw the word Eric written on it. There he is! Open the portal for me! Near that arrow, commanded George, pressing the enter key on Cosmos's keyboard. George is a member of the Order, and authorization granted. Spacesuit needed, Cosmos said. George rummaged through a pile of spacesuits, but he couldn't seem to find the one he had worn before. Eric's old spacesuits were all huge, so he reluctantly ended up wearing Annie's old pink one. It was a bit tight and he felt a little silly, but it was the only person he was going to see in outer space was Eric, so he figured it didn't matter. Once George was buckled into the sequined suit, Cosmos drew the doorway into outer space. George reached forward and opened the door, holding the portal frame with his hands, and he leaned out to have a look around. His feet were still anchored inside, in Eric's library. The part of outer space still seemed very similar to the one he had seen before, but this time he didn't see any planets. It didn't look like much. The image on Cosmos's screen wasn't cut in two at all. There were shining stars everywhere. Eric, however, was nowhere to be seen. Eric, can you hear me? Maybe he was in the wrong place. George looked back into the library towards Cosmos's screen. The Eric arrow was still there, and next to it he saw a new one that had George written on it. He realized what he saw at the doorway wasn't yet on Cosmos's screen. Cosmos had to process the information, and only after he had done so would it appear on the screen. George leaned through the door into outer space once more, making sure not to fall. Eric, are you there? Can you hear me? He yelled. Who's calling? Replied a faint voice through the transmitter inside his helmet. Eric, where are you? Do you see the door? Oh, hello. Yes, George, I can see you. Stop shouting. You're hurting my ears. I'm coming straight towards you on your left. George looked to his left, and there was a little asteroid gently traveling through space. Sitting on it was Eric, and in each hand a rope attached to spikes he had planted on the rock. He looked very relaxed. What are you doing? He asked. Come back, cried George, trying to sound urgent. It's Grieper who sent you the letter. It's my fault. I spoke to him about Cosmos. George, replied Eric, right now I'm working, so we'll have to talk about this later. You definitely shouldn't have mentioned the Cosmos to anyone. Close the portal and go home. You don't understand. Grieper is horrible. I know him. He's my teacher. It must be a trap. Come back now, please. This morning he asked me if you had disappeared. That's enough. Stop being silly. Look around. There's nothing dangerous at all. Now go home and forget about Cosmos. I'm sure I should have shown you my computer. After all, I don't know. I'm not sure. George looked over at Eric's rock, and in a few seconds it was close enough for him to jump onto it. He took a few steps back into the library, paused, and ran towards the doorway, leaping through as far as the rock could. Holy planet, he said to Eric. Eric said, George, grab my hand.